Hi and welcome to Literary Hype. I am Stephanie, your Literary Hype Woman, and today's author conversation is a little bit outside of my comfort zone because I don't read a lot of horror. If you've been around, you know I don't read a lot of horror. But when you get the opportunity to talk to Stephen Graham Jones, you take it, especially when his book has something to do with vampires. So I braved the horror genre because Stephen Graham Jones and vampires. That's what happened. Stephen Graham Jones is the author of I Was a Teenage Slasher, The Only Good Indians, My Heart is a Chainsaw. Like, I have so many of his books and just hadn't got around to reading them because I am a chicken, I guess you could say. But his new book is called The Buffalo Hunter, and it does involve vampires. So therefore, I was game to not only read this, but to talk to Stephen Graham Jones about writing. And this man is so funny. Like, buckle up, because this is a good time. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Stephen Graham Jones. Well, welcome to Literary Hype. It's so exciting to have you on to talk about your brand new book, Buffalo Hunter. That cover is so good. So before we get into the story, talk a little bit about the creation of this cover.
I think art department got back to us with, I want to say 4 covers, maybe I remember 3 of them anyways. And one of them was really Western, and I liked that Western one a lot. But this Buffalo one, we all fell in love with it immediately, and then it was just a matter of picking the right font, mostly the font and the color. But they kept that Western font for my name and for 2 of the Buffalo Hunter words. It just works, you know? And like I've thought about it. What's the difference in the buffalo coming from one side and not the other side? And it feels right the side it's coming from, but I don't know why.
It does. It was on the wall at Saga's booth at New York Comic Con, and so many people were stopping. Like, what's that one? It took me a very long time to realize there was 2 hunters on there, though. Embarrassingly long. But so for anybody who hasn't seen this book already, what's it about?
In 2012, a diary is found in the wall of a crumbling parsonage that belonged to the ancestor of a Wyoming professor. She begins transcribing that diary. Turns out to be her ancestor was a Lutheran pastor who was visited every Sunday for a few weeks by a Blackfeet guy who had a fantastic, violent story to tell him. And so Etsy, this 2012 character, this professor, is transcribing that up and getting not just the transcription of that Blackfeet guy's story, but the moments between where the pastor is questioning the story and poking and prodding at it and trying to find whether it's true.
What was your initial spark for writing this story?
My initial spark, I think it was outrage or maybe just plain rage. It was, I always knew what happened to the buffalo, of course, or what was attempted to happen to them, to do to the buffalo, to eradicate them all, to make all us Indians go to the reservations because we wouldn't have food. So we'd have to be dependent on the government for rations. But for some reason, it boiled over back in the last, I don't know, year and a half for me. And I think it was, I saw a video. I don't live on the reservation. I live in Colorado. I saw a video from the reservation of a lot of our buffalo herd being let loose, like beyond the fences. And it made my heart bigger in a way, but it also made me angrier in a way too, that it should have always been like this.
This is like historical blended with the horror as well. What kind of research process did you have in digging into 1912?
I wish I could say that I was a good researcher. I don't think I am, but I do have friends who are really good researchers. And so, right at the very front of this project, while I was writing Etsy's first chapter, I emailed 2 people, maybe 3, no, 3 people actually, and said, "Give me everything you got." And so, man, immediately they had a lot, and they sent me a lot, and that's what I needed, and it worked perfectly. One of the friends helped me immensely with all the language, like the Blackfoot terms. And I say Blackfoot because Blackfoot's a language. We're the Blackfeet, but it's all, we used to be 3 different like units within the bigger Blackfoot Confederacy. Anyways, and then one of them is a history guy up in New York, and he had written a book on the Blackfeet, so he knew all the like events and people and places. And another friend is a scholar, an English scholar, and he had done a lot of research into all the newspaper clippings and letters and stuff. And so the 3 of them were exactly who I needed to write this book.
You often hear about how Native American culture really tells their histories through stories. Were there any stories passed down to you that helped play into this?
Not particularly, no. I grew up knowing about the massacre that happened in January of 1870, and, let me think, any stories? There probably were some that are now in here that they're just so much part of me that I can't even think of that, but I can't pull out anything particular, no.
So this little vampire guy,
Mhm.
you write from his perspective a lot for a lot of this. Talk about crafting and getting into the mind of a vampire and like those cravings and feelings that he's having as he's feeding.
Good Stab, it was less about engaging his vampirism for me. To me, like, engaging his vampirism is kinda like just imagining, "What if I were a leopard? What if I were a lion? What if I were a wolf? What if," like, civilization, like, human civilization to me, it wasn't about, art, culture, all that stuff. It was about, there's my livestock, that's how you think like a vampire. That's how I think like a vampire anyways. But making Goodstab's voice work on the page meant he had to be period accurate. He had to be a product of the 19th century, which he didn't even think in centuries. But, so he was born in 1833, and he did not think in a way that Western people think, which is very rigid and kind of comes out of scientific stuff. He thought in a way that lent, truth and credence and like, undoubtability, there's probably a better word than that, to spiritual matters, to magical things. Like, the there was our world and the supernatural world, and there was no harsh line between those for him, and that was the tricky part, was getting my head working like that so I could then write in his voice.
How did you approach deciding what pieces of vampire lore you wanted to use?
How I decided that was which ones did I need to retain to make the vampire make sense. For me to write about something for 450 pages, I need to believe in it enough that I can invest intellectually and emotionally. And for me to do that, it has to make sense. I think over the centuries, all the retellings of the vampire stories, it's like the vampire's a snowball just rolling downhill from, I mean, not just John Polidori, but from like Serbia, from Slovakia, all these places where we had different vampires popping up, Egypt even. All these dramatic conveniences like charming or flying, or not being able to enter a door without invitation, all that stuff. I feel like those were dramatic conveniences in certain stories that then became characteristics. And I'm not saying that those are bad characteristics, but I'm saying they don't make sense altogether as a single from a single organism. And so I had to make this vampire make sense as an organism. And to do that, I had to strip away most of the conventional vampire traits. I think the vampire I believe in is a lot more like the vampires in the 1987 film Near Dark than, say, Dracula.
As a Twilight girly, grew up with the vampires with all kinds of
Mhm,
different
mhm.
characteristics, but their kind of enemy was the Native Americans who were the werewolves, and you're a big werewolves fan. So why make this story vampires instead of werewolves?
Because the big reason is I've done werewolves with mongrels, and I was thinking that if I did werewolves now, I would like be forced. I kept working myself into a corner where I can only do werewolves that are mongrels. I can't change that lore anymore because people are gonna say, "Why do you not believe in those werewolves anymore?" That's what I fear. I don't think people would really say that. But the real reason is I wanted to come at the buffalo hunters, and I didn't want someone coming at them one by one when they're out there with their, rifles, 3 miles apart from each other. I wanted to come at the buffalo hunters at night when they're around their fire and they think it's safe, and to me, it makes sense for a vampire to be that predator because the night is its natural place to be.
So you wrote this in an epistolary format, which is gives it a whole different voice and unique kind of vibe. So talk a little bit about why you decided that format and what it was like for you to write in a different vibe.
Yeah, I love epistolary. It's my favorite, like, delivery method, I think. My favorite actual voice or tone is second person present tense, but, as far as, like, shape of the text, I like epistolary a whole lot. I've done it twice before, I guess. 3 times, really. I was a teenage slasher as epistolary as well. But, um, it's just I guess I wanted an artifact is basically what it is. I wanted this, whole story to be at a remove, maybe even 2 removes. I think that's why it's nested twice. And I think I'm kind of, I don't know, susceptible to, like, urban legends. Like, everybody has a story about, "This happened to my cousin's roommate," and, like, when it gets, like, 2 or 3 moves removes away, then we think, "Oh, that's kinda true," and it's a ridiculous thing about us, but we think like that, and so it's just a tactic to make it feel maybe possible, and because vampires are hard to believe in, but if you nest them inside a couple other narratives, they're like a pearl you find in the center, I think.
You've got 3 main voices throughout this story, and they're all so unique. How do you approach capturing these individual characters' voices and making it clear on the page that without, like, a subtitle that this is who is talking?
It was tricky. I mean, the first way is just the chapter headings, of course, but that's not always enough. I also had to differentiate each of them with language style and punctuation, and, like, Etsy on the outside in 2012, she has access to everything she wants. So, parentheses, am dashes, footnotes if she wanted them, textual effects if she wants them, section breaks. She's got everything. When you go one step in, you've got Arthur. He's got these big, long Dickens dashes or Victorian dashes, and he uses conjunctions, coordinated conjunctions, in a different way than Etsy does because I wanted to distinguish. And he also kind of encrusts his writing with um, these Baroque terms. He was educated in the Victorian era, and he's been isolated in the West, and so his vocabulary has both decayed and then grown up again, not quite pure. So his words are not always totally right. He's kind of making things up out here where it's safe to without using a column on it. And then Goodstep in the middle, he gets so little. He doesn't have section breaks. He has very limited punctuation. He uses kind of literal translations of Blackwood terms to get things across to Arthur Brocard that he's telling his story or his confession to. And, never any italics. Arthur doesn't have italics either, because how do you do italics with handwriting? And I can't figure that out. He could have had underlines, but I just did underlines, and I was a teenage slasher, so I didn't think I could do those again.
I mean, you can do whatever you want. I saw online that you have a background in hunting. How has that helped you with writing horror novels?
I've cut open a whole lot of animals, and I'm, seen a lot of violence done. I mean, we like to pretend that hunting is just, sportsmanship or getting meat, but it's a violent act for sure. But it's no more violent than going to the grocery store and buying a pound of meat. But that's a violent act too. I think it's all the same. It's just whether you want to actually get your hands bloody or not. And I don't mean to say that it's better to get your hands bloody or anything like that, but different people have different ways of doing it, I think. So, yeah, hunting has helped me a lot. Yeah, I've held lots of organs in my hand. I've had to crawl inside of animals on the side of hills to push their guts and lungs and stuff out of them. And I think I don't know when you've been slathered in blood like that, and you know the smell of it and the taste of it, and then you have to sit there on the dead animal and eat a turkey sandwich or something. Like I don't know. It. I'm not saying I'm better or different or anything, but I do think it's given me a little access into gore, maybe?
Well, you don't have to say it. Lots of other people have said very, very nice things like about you. One thing I saw online said that you're the new Stephen King. I saw something from NPR calling this your masterpiece. What's it like for you to hear all this kind of praise, especially since you've had such a long career that's just really blown up in the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful. When you get found, anytime you get found is great. I think it's actually better to get found later in your career than earlier. The people, like, if I would have been found earlier, then I wouldn't have had the freedom to experiment and play and discover who I was on the page. Like, I had 15, 20 books probably where I could do the craziest, wildest, m- most least likely to be successful things. And people published it. Not big print runs, not big marketing distribution or any of that, but I learned who I was and what I could get away with and not just what like the boundaries of my abilities were, but how I could sneak over those boundaries. And that's been essential.
You've published at least 35 books.
Yeah.
What is something that you have learned through this process that you wish you would have known back in book one?
Be careful about who you assign rights to. Be careful what contracts you sign. I've had a lot of books locked up in rights battles that people hold on to them just kind of for meanness sometimes, or not just meanness, like neglect, it feels like. And yeah, so if I had it to do again, I'd be a little bit more careful with the contracts I signed.
And you're a teacher,
I am
correct?
professor.
Which is you've got like many degrees.
Mhm.
You're a very, very smart man. What have you learned from teaching writing that has helped you in your own writing process?
I hear myself like what I do as a writing teacher is I'm trying to infect my students with like a sense of narrative ethics, with a sense of obligation towards the stories and the writing both. And so I'll hear myself telling them this principle, this guideline. There's not really hard and fast rules, but there are things that tend to work more than others and things you don't want to do. I hear myself saying that, and then 3 hours later, I'm in my office or at home writing a chapter or a story or something, and I realize, oh man, I gotta hold myself to that now too. So I think it's made me better. It's kept me honest.
The internet tells me you're a big slasher movie fan. What have you learned from watching slasher movies that has helped you create epic, shocking twists in your stories?
Yeah, I mean, when it's a slasher boom like we had in the early '80s, or we had again after Scream, and we're kind of having that. I wouldn't say it's a boom now, but it maybe is some more interest into it.
Definitely growth in the
Yeah,
horror sphere.
yeah. What you get is competition, where every next film is trying to out escalate the last one with the most over the top development or surprise or twist they can stage. And so what I've learned from the slasher is that's a wonderful game to play, but you've got to set that stuff up. You can't drop it out of anywhere because the films that persist that we watch over and over are the ones that set it up and allow it to organically come from the story, if that makes sense. Jason popping up out of the water at the end of Friday the 13th. I mean, I know that Sean Cunningham, Tom Savini didn't sign on for the second one because that didn't make sense, and it doesn't totally make sense, but it kinda does because we know that Jason drowned in the lake, so this is a slasher, it's a horror film, he can come back, and that kinda stuff really, is something I latch on to and try to use as much as I can. Because 'cause you're right, it's not just in today's marketplace, we have to be shocking and surprising and all that. I think it's always been that way with art. I mean, Michelangelo carving David or whatever, I think he was trying to surprise people with how finely he could do these veins on the arm and all that stuff.
So, in perusing your website, you have a little tab for readers' tattoos. What's your favorite tattoo that someone has gotten based on your books?
Oh, man, it's hard to pick a favorite. Let me think. He got a buffalo on his forearm, and so did another person I know, Lauren Deering. She got a buffalo, I believe. Or did she get a buffalo? Yeah, she got a buffalo. It's cool seeing more and more buffalo in the world.
Buffalo are known for not being the nicest of animals. Have you ever interacted with any?
No, I never have. I had a chance years ago. Somebody called me up and said, "Hey, man, this dude is letting people hunt buffalo on his property." And I looked into it, and I think it was for $500 you go shoot a buffalo, but all you did was you stood his fence and shot a buffalo that was eating grass out there. That didn't seem like hunting to me, so I didn't do it.
My sister used to work at a vet clinic that helped with a bison butchering. Like, they were raised for meat, and so it was time to butcher, so she got to help with that, and, like, she brought me back a jawbone, so I had a buffalo jawbone for a long time.
I've got a let's see, I've got one skull. Yeah, I think I've got a big mounted buffalo bull on my wall, but I mean just the head and the cape, but um I've got a big skull, and I got it. One of my friends is also in that industry. His company sells bison meat, and I was in his office one day, and he had a buffalo skull in the corner. And I said, "Man, I always wanted one of those." And he said, "Come with me." So we went up to his like warehouse area. It was just a few stairs away, and it was a huge empty area, like, I don't know, 200 yards long, 100 yards wide. And on the ground, in even rows, like stormtroopers, were buffalo skulls just stacked to the horizon. And it was so cool. He said, "Pick whichever one you want." And he let me have one. And it's pretty so cool.
People thought I was weird for having because I had a bison jawbone and a cow jawbone, and they were like, "Why?" I'm like, "I don't know, I just like them."
Yeah, yeah. You can make weapons out of them, right?
I definitely was not a child running around going, "Yeah," like, "Siblings, go away." No, I never threatened to hit anybody with a jawbone. What are you talking about?
Yeah, yeah. Isn't there some Bible story about somebody who slew an army of bad guys with a donkey jawbone or something?
Something like there's just definitely something.
That stuck in my head because I was always like, was there nothing better to use? You know?
I mean, maybe. It was Bible times. They didn't have AK-47s then, okay? Jawbones did the job. Just whap. See, now you gotta work a jawbone into your next one, like,
Yeah,
kill somebody with a jawbone.
I do. I do.
And another thing I noticed across your website was your humor that comes through. Like, there's hints of it in the books, but when you're writing as yourself, it's entirely different and very funny. So talk a little bit about your personal brand of humor.
Oh, my humor, I think it's mostly dad humor. That's what my kids tell me. They like groan when I say stuff. So more and more when I'm at Mike's and I say something I think is funny, I'm just waiting for people to just like roll their eyes and look away embarrassedly, you know?
I loved it, especially there's like a why I write thing, and it was like so heartfelt and deep, but also very humorous to me. I love a good like dry humor.
Yeah.
But you have so many other things coming up. Like, how do you keep all of this going with all these books coming out?
I just love to write. So it's to me like writing is going to recess and getting to play. And I don't like to do chores. I don't like to do work, but I like to play. So I think that's why I write. If writing ever does become work, maybe I go do something else, you know?
Well, we're glad you haven't gotten tired of it yet. You have a novella coming out with Kindle Unlimited, so talk a little bit about what that story is and how you got involved in that process.
Oh, the Indigo Room. That's right. It's in a anthology. Shivers? Is it called Shivers? It might be called Shivers. But yeah, who was in that? Katrina Ward, Grady Hendrix, Joe Hill, Owen King. I think that's the roster. And they just hit us up and said, "Hey, all y'all write a scary story about like a scary place." And it didn't have to be a haunted house. It could be a haunted room. It could probably have been a haunted shoebox. I don't know. Um, and so I wrote one story, and it this one actually wants to be a novella. It's probably 16,000 words right now, and it needs to be longer to actually work. I was trying to make it work in too short a space, and so I gave up on that one. I said, I'm just gonna write a shorter thing. So then I wrote it's probably 12,000 words. What'd you call that? A novelette, I guess. And about meeting a conference room on like the, I don't know, 13th floor of a building that is not a great place to be on a Friday afternoon.
Dun dun dun. But you've also got a re-release of Mapping the Interior coming out. What's it like getting to have one of your old books brought back like this?
It's been great. Like Nightfire is bringing mapping back. Mapping was never gone as a thing, so it like getting new purchase with a new cover and a new place is really cool. And I'm getting to work with Kelly Lonesome, who was my editor for Mongrels back in 2016. I always like working with Kelly. And but in the past year, I've had a lot of Open Road has reprinted a lot of my old titles. I can't even remember which of them, and there's more coming this year as well. And that thrills me to no end because those books were largely unavailable, and now people are getting to find them, and I like that a lot.
It's really cool when, like, an author pops off and then they're back stock. It's this whole big re I don't renaissance is not the right word, but that's the one that's coming to my mind. Just getting that big boost across the board. What's it like for you to see these books that have because 'cause you've been writing, what, 20, 25
Yeah,
years?
20. Well, I mean, my first story was published in 95, right? 96, right around there.
Yeah, so, okay, 30 years. I can math. Math is fine. I do words, not numbers. So what's it like getting to see these older books of yours get new life?
It's been really, really cool. But it's also scary because when I was first starting out writing, like I didn't know how to hide, I guess. And so I feel like I'm more exposed in those pieces. But that's how it's supposed to be with art. If you're not vulnerable, then are you really doing art?
And then what should we know about Killer on the Road coming out in July?
Killer on the Road is set on Interstate 80, crossing Wyoming, going up and down both way. Well, one way from Laramie, anyways. Harper is a high school senior, has a big blowout fight with her mom, storms out of the house, says she's hitting the road, does that, ends up finding some of her friends. They're making this big trek together, and they run afoul of someone who has been preying upon people on the road, and it becomes a night of trying to survive.
Dun dun dun. So many dun dun duns in horror. For someone who is just now starting to try to get into horror, they're interested in it because horror is seeing such a big boost right now. Where would you recommend they start?
Start with themselves, because what has the potential to scare the reader is that which scares you. Like, don't consult a survey group or a statistical analysis that people are scared of spiders and they're scared of drowning. So therefore I'm going to write a story about spiders that pull you under the water. Like, that's if that doesn't terrify you, essentially, if that's not at the core of your terror, then it's hard to make it scary for the reader, I think. Write about the anxieties, concerns, issues, nightmares, terrors that you suffer in your life. Give them dramatic form, and you have a chance of using them like the videotape in the ring and passing them on.
So then what about Buffalo Hunter Hunter scares you?
What about Buffalo Hunter Hunter scares me? That's a good question. I haven't thought about that. I mean, it scares me that there not be any buffalo anymore, but that's a big, wide scare or concern. I think what scares me about Buffalo Hunter Hunter is having to pay for something you did long ago, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago. That you're a different person now. You may yeah, maybe you I don't know, maybe you ran over a sign 30 years ago. Is it fair that the person who had to rebuild that sign is now coming for you to punish you for running over that sign? Maybe it is. I mean, it's just as much a crime as it was then as it is now. So that concerns me a lot, that something I did when I was in junior high is going to come back to haunt me.
I mean, we're seeing that with social media of
They
like
are.
tweets from 10, 15 years ago ruining careers.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I've done some awkward social media stuff, but mostly it's just typos because I can't see those little letters.
Eh, There are worse things you could do than typos. Anything else you want to talk about?
Oh, just thank everybody. I'm thankful that people are reading this book and finding it. And like, I was so nervous that people weren't going to be able to engage the old timey language and that they were going to need a different kind of vampire. But it seems like people are hooking into good stuff and hooking into Arthur Bocarn's speech patterns and everything. So I'm thrilled.
Yeah, there's a lot of 5-star ratings on this one.
Good.
A lot of them. Last question we always ask, because this is literary hype. What books are you hyped about right now?
I just read, well, about 2 months ago, anyways, Virginia Fato's Victorian Psycho, and that was nothing but fun. There's so much blood on the walls in that book. Short little book, like words to blood. I think it has the highest per capita. Is that just something you say?
The ratio?
Yeah, ratio. That's a good one. I should know words. I just read Karen Russell's The Antidote, which to me, maybe just because I have Buffalo Hunter Hunter eyes right now, seem to be dealing with a lot of similar issues to Buffalo Hunter Hunter. I'm excited for Michael Wehunt's October Film Haunt, which is a cult novel, and I usually don't engage cult novels that deeply, but his really is well done. And when I say well done, I mean amazingly written. And I'm excited to read Paul Tremblay's Another, which is his middle grade horror novel. I'm really interested to see what he does for the kids, and I suspect it's still going to scare me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with Literary Hype.
Thanks for having me. It's great.
Thanks to Steven for hanging out with me while he was in St. Louis for his book tour supporting the Buffalo Hunter Hunter. If you would like to check out this book or some of his other books, those links are down in the description for you, so make sure you check those out and support Literary Hype when you shop. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to hit the like button down below, subscribe to the Literary Hype YouTube channel so you get updates whenever I post new videos, and share this with a friend. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.